right, Nostalgia Trappers, let's do this. David Parsons here. I hope you are doing well, and I mean that sincerely. I really do, and I want to take a moment, if you'll indulge me, just to say why I am being sincere when I say I hope you're doing well, because you, whoever you are, have been loyal to this podcast for more than 10 years. I don't know if you specifically have been listening to this show for 10 years, but this show has had a constant, steady, loyal audience for all of these years. We haven't grown a ton. We haven't shrunk a ton. I just know that there are a few thousand people that listen to this show each month, and I kind of marvel at that. Part of me is kind of like, why does anyone care what I have to say? Part of me thinks that Justin Rogers Cooper is the real secret weapon of the show and the reason that most people tune in. But either way, you all have been listening to this show for a long time, and it means a lot to me. It's a big part of who I am, and that's why I want to share this with you. I am starting a new podcast called 120 Months. Don't worry, Nostalgia Trap isn't going anywhere. I'll still be posting as much as I always post. Episodes, guests, etc. Nostalgia Trap will still be a big part of the whole podcast universe that I'm creating here. But 120 Months is a project I've been thinking about for a while, and I'll save all the explanation of what it is for the introduction that's in this episode that you'll hear in just a few moments. But I wanted to just say at the outset, this means a lot to me. This is a project and a place where I can share ideas that I don't get to talk about in too much detail on Nostalgia Trap. 120 Months is a podcast, YouTube channel, online intellectual property thing. I'm putting a lot of stuff up on Instagram and maybe TikTok and stuff like that. You kind of got to do that now to grow your audience. But I wanted to sort of have a place to talk about the music of the 1990s. I'm doing this with my good friend John Lombardo. He was actually a guest on Nostalgia Trap many, many years ago. I've known John since the 1990s. When I first met him, I was in high school working at Marie Callender's, which is like this little country restaurant in Ventura, California, that I've talked about on the show several times. And John was a little bit older than me. He was in a band that was touring around, playing shows with like Smashing Pumpkins and Soundgarden and Nirvana. He had all these crazy stories about what it was like to be on the road in the 90s as a musician. And I kind of lost contact with John for a long, long time. We ran into each other at the gym a few months ago, and we started talking again. And we both, I think, were looking for a project where we could talk about something other than Trump and the awful turn that global politics have taken. We both are looking for a space to kind of go back in time and reflect on something else, particularly art and culture and music. So I had this idea brewing in my head for a while of 120 Months. If you are an MTV person, you may remember the show 120 Minutes, which was a show all about the alternative rock world of the 1990s. So it's kind of a play on that. But what we're doing is we are doing an episode about every single month of the 1990s, from January 1990 to December 1999. And we're talking about all the major album releases that came out that month. We're listening to them. I'm creating Spotify playlists. It's a whole thing, and again, I won't give you all the details here because I explain it in the episode you'll hear in a few moments. But I just wanted to say that the Nostalgia Trap audience is a really big part of what I have in mind for 120 Months. And I would love it if you check out the show, if you follow the Substack, subscribe to all of that stuff. Keep an eye on your email because I'm going to be offering deep discounts for Nostalgia Trap listeners who want to subscribe to the paywalled version of 120 Months on Substack. So there'll be like, I don't know, it's like a discount code or a special link. You'll get that soon when I start posting live streams and other stuff over on the 120 Months Substack. But it would mean a lot to me if you checked out all of our stuff, followed liked, subscribed, all that stuff you got to do. I would really appreciate it. And I hope you enjoy this episode. So without further delay, thank you for being a Nostalgia Trap listener. And here is 120 Months. Hello, internet friends, and welcome to 120 Months. My name is David Parsons. I am a podcaster and music fan and cat guy and certified 90s nostalgia freak. I don't know about you, but my life was completely determined by the fact that I was a teenager in the 1990s, obsessed with MTV and Rolling Stone magazine, and really the entirety of American popular culture. For better or worse, being a 90s kid made me into the person I am today, and I'm still coming to terms with that. And the way I come to terms with that mostly is through the music. The stuff that I loved, the stuff that I hated, and the stuff that I know that I missed because CDs were really expensive and there were no streaming services in the 90s. So this is our chance to go back and listen to it all and discover the stuff that made that decade so special. So what we're going to do on this podcast / YouTube channel / internet content thing is we're going to listen to all the notable album releases month by month from January 1990 to December 1999. If I did the math correctly, that's 120 months. My friend and partner for this journey is John Lombardo. You will meet him in a second. He is a person who had a front row seat for some of the biggest music of the 1990s. He was the lead singer of an alternative rock band that toured with groups like Gin Blossoms, Nirvana, Soundgarden, Smashing Pumpkins. I'm going to get really annoyed by all the names that John drops on this show. He has crazy stories to tell us and really deep insights to share about the way the music industry worked and the way that pop culture was moving in the 90s. Very much looking forward to hearing all of John's takes on this show. We made Spotify playlists for every one of these episodes, so you can listen along with us and check out our Substack page to find all of our content in one place. The links are in the description below. Let's get started. This is 120 Months. In January 1990, the number one song in America was also the same number one song from December 1989, and that is, do you know what it is, John?
I don't.
It is a song called Another Day in Paradise by
Phil Collins, right?
Phil Collins from his album But Seriously. The reason I bring this up as we launch the good ship 120 Months is because it's sort of an appropriate song for the beginning and for the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. That song, if you know it, is a very earnest, almost corny, some even said exploitative take on homelessness. And it was the last number one song for Phil Collins, which I didn't realize either.
Oh, think twice.
Yes.
Yeah, Phil's not doing too good these days. I'm sorry to hear that.
I know. Yeah. Sad. Yeah. I think they made a documentary about him, actually.
I think he just toured with his son playing with him, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, now, this is why I bring this up, and this is why I think this is a good place for us to start, is thinking about Phil Collins. He was, and that kind of corny sort of, we are the world, I'm going to solve a crisis with my ballad. That's very 80s to me. It feels like a very particular 80s type of thing.
Obnoxiously earnest, self-important rock and roll.
Yeah. And he was criticized for it.
Yeah.
But the song was number one, so what does it matter to him, right?
A massive string of hits. He was the second drummer from Genesis to become a huge solo artist.
Yeah. So are you, is that true?
Yeah.
Who's the other one?
Peter Gabriel.
No shit.
Yeah, I believe that's true.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Phil Collins and like that type of stuff, it seems like to me, like part of what I was thinking about with January 1990 and sort of launching into the 90s and thinking about what changed in music, what changed in culture. One of those things is an earnestness dropping away and a kind of irony coming in. And the 90s being known as an ironic, sort of jokey, sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek kind of era. Not that there wasn't earnestness in the 90s, but it feels appropriate to me that Phil Collins would have his final number one hit in January 1990.
There's an interesting context for that, for what was happening in 1990, for that, as we shifted into that decade, in pop culture, it was a decade of in music. It was a decade of the pop star, right? It was the first decade of that marriage of music and video. So the 80s were defined by MTV.
Yeah,
and so you had a different type of pop star. There was a large, like this grandiosity to pop stardom. And pop music really rose to the fore. The 70s was rock and roll. It was Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and the Eagles, and even the female artists of the 70s that were popular, like Linda Ronstadt, they had a rock feel to them. And then there was this introduction of technology into the creation of music.
Yeah.
Video is the medium, but also drum machines and synthesizers and so much new technology for music. And that was what dominated the 80s. And it was also it was a decade of excess culturally. A lot of cocaine, people spending fortunes on things, right? It was
I think of Michael Jackson when I think about 80s music. Michael Jackson and Madonna.
Sure.
Because I was really young in the 80s, and it just feels like they were the most vibrant, visible stars of the culture.
For sure. Prince.
Yeah.
And then you also had rock and roll morphing into glam rock.
Right.
Once again, over the top excess, hairspray, makeup, and then you had hip hop sort of take off as well. So it was a very interesting time, and it was also, get this, think about this for a second, because we all know what happened in the 90s musically. We're talking about music primarily here. It was the last decade where the underground was underground. The underground was about to become mainstream.
Right.
As this decade launched. So I think it's interesting to look at what caused that. And I will tell you, in my opinion, that there was fatigue. There was pop star fatigue. And then there was also, so you know what? Something really important happened in 1989.
A lot happened in 1989.
A little TV show called The Simpsons came out.
It's funny. I thought you were going to say the fall of the Berlin Wall.
The Berlin Wall fell. That's true also.
That's funny that to associate those two things together, actually. Like the birth of The Simpsons and the fall of the Berlin Wall. Because it does feel like a new era being born.
Yeah, for sure. And The Simpsons was the first really ground-shaking satire of American life.
Right.
Like really poking fun at the shallowness and stupidity of American culture.
I remember my parents hating that show and feeling like we shouldn't be watching it, but we loved it as kids.
Oh, God. So I want you to know that I did not...
It's still on, by the way. I don't understand that.
So crazy.
Yeah.
I would never have thought that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But it was the only show I watched for years. Back then, I did not watch TV. I'd stopped watching TV. Things happened like Friends and Seinfeld that everybody was talking about. I never saw them.
That's so punk.
It was
such a thing to be like, I don't own a television.
I didn't have cable, but I would go over to my friend Brooke's house and watch The Simpsons every week. I like that show really informed the way my perception of American life moved into that decade of the 90s.
Yeah.
And I think I think that's there are other things we could point to, but I think that there was America was starting to look at itself in an unfavorable light. Right?
Yeah.
And
it's interesting because it's not like the 60s hadn't already happened. You know, like the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement. That was a moment where people were looking at America in an unfavorable light. But it feels like in the 80s there was this Reagan-esque sort of return. It felt like Reagan was the first iteration, or maybe one of many sort of versions of "Make America Great Again," and kind of returning to the version of America that was the 1950s.
Reagan actually used that as a campaign slogan.
Right. Yeah.
He did.
The Leave It to Beaver shit.
Yeah, Make America Great Again. And, he was extremely popular among probably the mainstream, the largest swath of the American demographic at that time. And the only place that Reagan was reviled was in the underground. Like, there was all these punk rock records that came out in the 80s that are anti-Reagan records.
Yeah, those
Dead
are hilarious.
Kennedys and Wasted Youth, and all these. People thought Reagan. The underground thought Reagan was the Antichrist.
I was thinking about those Reagan punk songs because the titles are hilarious. And they're like really. It seems like it's part of. It seems like it's part of what we're talking about. Is this sort of like underground punk sarcastic thing? It's not just like Simpsons wasn't just a take on America. It was a take on the American family, right?
Yeah.
Like the sitcom family,
yeah, that's right?
Yeah, and like, look at what dad is like. Look at what mom is like. Some of these songs that were about Reagan were just,
Reagan's In by Wasted Youth.
Right.
There's a song called... there was a song called "We've Got a Bigger Problem Now." That was there's a song called "California Uber Alles."
Oh yeah, that's a good
by
one.
Dead Kennedys, and it was about Jerry Brown, and he was governor of California.
Yeah.
They redid that song on an album called "Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables," and it was called "We've Got a Bigger Problem Now." It was all about Reagan.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that sentiment in the '80s with Reagan.
I loved California Uber Alles and Kill the Poor too.
Kill the Poor is great.
That
That whole album, it's called "Fresh Fruit, Rotting Vegetables." That's an amazing punk rock album. It's one of the great ones.
Well, I wanted to talk about what was going on in January 1990 musically, and those who are listening can check out our Spotify list and follow along with some of these albums. But I wonder what stuck out to you, because some of the albums that came out this month, and these are the ones that I thought were particularly notable. I think I chose these albums. There were a lot of albums that came out, obviously, during these months. But these ones are the ones that sort of stuck out to me. So there's one by Daniel Johnston, his album, which is called 1990. He's a figure who is a weirdo from Austin, Texas, who became deeply associated with Austin, Texas, and eventually is going to be sort of name-checked by Kurt Cobain on MTV with a T-shirt that is of an alien that says, "Hi, how are you?" That everyone wondered, what's that cool shirt that Cobain is wearing? And Daniel Johnston got a burst of, like, I guess, notoriety from that. I didn't find Daniel Johnston until much later. A lot of this stuff, honestly. Toad the Wet Sprocket's Pale, which is an album I know you'll have something to say about, John, because this is like local stuff for us.
Right.
They're from Santa Barbara, California. Right. We're sitting
just
here.
up the road. Yeah.
Yep, we're sitting here in Ventura, California. Ween's debut album, God, Ween, Satan.
The Oneness.
The Oneness. Another jokey sort of thing going on there. And really, Ween is a whole world, and we can get into Ween. The Sundays, which is an English alternative band. I will say this. Listening to this list this week, the Sundays are the ones I liked the most. Like, they're the ones I would most likely to be listening to today because of this. I don't know. I like the style.
Their big hit song is is vying for my song of the month.
Oh, nice.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Here's what the story ends. Great band. Really cool, jangly pop from Brit pop, really interesting singer. Harriet Wheeler's an interesting singer. She's got sort of a wispy, reedy voice, but she was a good lyricist, and
Yeah, there's something really cool about
their sound. If I may say this.
Yes, please. You're allowed to say
my
this.
22-year-old self thought she was quite easy on the eyes as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, she belongs
I'm far too mature to think that now, David.
She belongs in that category of like Dolores Reardon from the Cranberries. Or Bjork. I mean, we're going to get into these sort of 90s alt girls because
what a genius.
I mean, you made a joke about it, but like attraction to lead singers is a thing, believe it or not. And like it drives so much. And I definitely could say, and I think this will, as we take this journey through all these months and all these different years of the 1990s and watch the music evolve month by month, I think we'll notice that, like, I don't know, those alt girls, they sort of created a template for me of like what kind of women I was attracted to. And
That's a good point.
Yeah, totally.
It's true for the male lead singers.
Oh yeah, they were all hot.
That was the last era of rock and roll, really.
Look at Chris Cornell. Look
Gorgeous.
at Kurt Cobain.
Yeah.
You know, they're like angelic looking dudes.
Fucking Cornell. I used to that guy. You know, I was a touring musician at the time. Like, he gets to look like that and sound like that.
Yeah.
There was a lot of jealousy. But rock and roll, the 90s is the last decade of rock and roll, the ascendancy of rock and roll. And rock and roll is about sex.
Yeah,
it is,
right.
To some extent. It really is. So the sex appeal of the musicians can sometimes play a role in what we talk about with it. But it was as I said, you know, for rock music, another interesting point about going into the 90s, and I do want to talk about a couple of those artists in particular, but another thing to remember is that at that time, rock music, there were these one-hit wonders that, I don't know if you remember, right around the end of the 80s, like Michael Penn. If I were Romeo in black jeans. Remember that song, No Myth?
It sounds familiar.
There were these pop guys that had these one-hit wonders, but most of the rock charts were dominated still by glam metal at that time. It was Motley Crue and White Snake, and, you know, that was that era, the late 80s.
Did you ever get into any of that music?
I hated that music. I was in my late teens, early 20s, trying to get gigs in LA, being an alternative rock band,
right?
Influenced by punk rock and the Replacements and Husker Du and those kind of the Pixies, you know. Those are the bands I was influenced by. As a huge Fugazi fan, and we were trying to get gigs, and we couldn't get fucking arrested at that time.
How did you get into those bands as alternative bands? Because now I think people take it for granted that, like, the internet exists and you can sort of look around and find things. Wow. But how did you find that scene? Is it through friends?
Well, I was in bands very young, so
right.
Yes. And I used to, here's how I got into that stuff. First of all, there were like pirate radio stations that my brother and I used to listen to late at night that would play like Bad Religion and Dead Kennedys and stuff late at night. And, you know, and then like, I think I told you this story, but for me, for those of you that most of you don't know who the hell I am. I've been a musician my whole life. I was a touring musician at that time. In the 90s.
There will be a month where we'll be talking about the releases from your band.
Oh, great.
John.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So in the early 80s, when I was discovering punk rock, I was, I was 13. I was in my first band when I was 13. And so I was always looking at music. And it's so cool. And don't get me wrong, because I think having all this music at your fingertip is cool. Yeah. I listen to so much music still. But back then, I would ride my skateboard down to the record store, Jailhouse Records, and I'd go in there and look through the bins.
Yeah.
And go, oh, this looks cool. I remember one time, like my brother.
You're talking about vinyl?
Vinyl, yeah. My brother, I stole Black Market Clash because I thought the cover looked cool.
Yeah.
You know, really, like that was. And then my brother had found this pirate radio station that played music late at night, and that's how we discovered like all this American punk rock, like Minor Threat and Bad Religion and stuff. They'd play those bands on there. So there was that kind of a thing. And another thing I think is interesting, and I really think the 90s is the last decade of this as well, was that became an identity. Music was my identity in high school. I was a punk rocker. That's who I hung out with. That's how I dressed. That's how I was known. And there were the surfers and the dance people and the jocks.
Hippies?
There were hippies, yes.
Goths at all?
Yeah. The goths and the punk rock people kind of commingled quite a bit.
Yeah.
It wasn't so...
I don't think these scenes exist as cleanly anymore.
Well, my son
I recognize what you're talking about.
My son's a musician, and I can tell you, I'm around a lot of young kids that are into music. They don't see it that way. They're into everything.
Right.
They're into everything. Although my son is kind of a purist. He doesn't listen to a lot of music. He listens to mostly 80s and 90s music.
That's funny. I wonder how much that scenester stuff and like that worrying about like, does it fit into the category that I'm a part of? How much that like crippled your ability to appreciate all kinds of music.
You have no idea the opportunities I missed. I could have gone and seen David Bowie. I could have gone and seen The Cure. I could have gone and seen
David Bowie wasn't cool to you?
Bowie was, of course, cool to me, but Like I remember my brother went with his girlfriend to go see David Bowie on the Serious Moonlight tour, Modern Love and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't that interested in it. What
Right.
a fucking idiot, you know? Like the Smiths came and I could have seen the Smiths.
Right.
But I was too cool for school. And what a terrible thing. Like there's so many bands that I listen to all the time now. Right now, The Cure is one of my favorite bands right now. I wouldn't have gone and seen them in high school. It would have made me look stupid.
Yeah, well, that's why I brought up Phil Collins in part, was because there was a time. So when the 90s started, I was a little kid. I was 11 years old when the 90s started. And I was into like Phil Collins and Billy Joel and Rod Stewart, right? Like my first CD ever, the first CD I ever purchased was Rod Stewart's Unplugged and Seated, which came out in 93. And it had like, you know, Maggie May.
Sure.
And Have I Told You Lately and all the... I loved those songs. But then at some point, as I came of age as a teenager and college kid, like those guys became very uncool to me. Like I had to cast them aside and be like, and loudly be like, Phil Collins fucking sucks, you know, like that shit's stupid.
Yeah.
And it feels like the 90s culture did that too in a lot of ways.
For sure.
And what I remember too about it is like how much MTV and VH1 were parts of my life, and VH1 was where that stuff went. Like the corny stuff, you could still find Phil Collins videos.
Yeah, that's right.
You could find like, it was more like adult type stuff. And I liked them both. I always did. And I think that part of me is grateful for the fact that as you get older, you drop that shit, and you're like, right now, I will listen to a Billy Joel record without thinking this is uncool. There are a couple songs on the Greatest Hits album, honestly, that don't really work for me.
Billy Joel?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like
but I still love that corny stuff.
I'll tell you what changed my mind about a lot of this stuff, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. I want us to talk about those songs, but as my career changed as being a professional musician, I went through a period where I had to learn to perform a lot of different styles of music.
Right.
You know, being a professional musician and everything from, you know, Led Zeppelin to Depeche Mode, I had to learn a lot of this material, and I got such an appreciation for the craft of songwriting that I didn't have when I was young, because it wasn't about an image for me anymore. It was about a paycheck.
Right.
And I just learned to put all that bullshit down and appreciate it. And like I said, I don't think that kind of stuff exists anymore. There are pluses and minuses to it. I think there's also something I think if you look at the greatest bands of all time, they thought they were the coolest things in the world, and their scene was what they were all about.
Right.
And that's kind of what made them great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the unsiloing of that is a good thing for kids.
I agree. And part of me still will defend the scenesterism and my particular sort of, everyone has their, I mean, I think part of what we're talking about here, and maybe over the course of the 90s, we'll recognize it in ourselves and in the wider culture, is sort of like developing a taste, developing a kind of set of values of the type of music you like and what you respond to. You don't often have control over that, though. I think the scenesterism thing, or being hip or a hipster or whatever, can often like kind of get in the way of that.
It sure can.
Yeah.
Look, the bottom line is, I can tell you this for sure. Being a hipster or a scenester, it's just another bigotry.
Yeah, right.
It is.
Yeah,
it really is. It's just another bigotry.
Yeah.
And listen, there's
and
shitty
it's
music out there.
Self-judgment too. It's judgment of others and judgment of yourself.
But there's crappy music out there.
Sure.
In fact, I would say most popular music remains crappy.
Yeah.
So I'm not suggesting you should just love everything, but I do think that the medium and the art form that is music should be something you connect with. It should not be something you connect with on the basis of ego.
Right. And you can over-intellectualize it, too.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you were ever like a Pitchfork reader, but like Pitchfork Media and Pitchfork, they became like this sort of like...
Pitchfork.
Yeah, they're still around, but I don't think they have quite the influence they have anymore. Now people are on YouTube, believe it or not, listening to music reviews and podcasts and things like that. But Pitchfork had such a fucking snarky... ironic, above it all take on music. Yeah. And I found myself very attracted to that when I first read it. I was like, these guys are smart. They know fucking music. They're going to like describe to me why this album is a 7.8 and this other album is a 5.4. And it's going to be, it's going to clarify things for me. But I think I moved on from that a little bit.
Good for you.
Because you have to sort of like respond to music on its own.
Well,
I used to like be like, what does Pitchfork say about this before I listen to it? You know what I mean?
Was it L.A. based?
No, they're Chicago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That sounds very L.A. in the 90s.
Right. Well, the Pitchfork is more like 2000 stuff.
Okay.
So like I think that they were like one of the first big like internet music review sites. Yeah.
I remember when I was probably 23. I remember the first time it was a guy. His name was Steve Riskin.
Mm-hmm.
He had an indie label called Meltdown Records, and we did a couple of singles on Meltdown Records. And I remember him telling me, "You guys should have a website." And I was like, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah, amazing.
Like a spider web?
Right.
Yeah, I remember that.
All right, so let's talk about some of these albums. What do you want to start with? I mean, maybe we should think about Toad the Wet Sprocket, because they're a band that I have to admit, I never really got into Toad the Wet Sprocket all that much. And listening to them this week, I sort of was like, oh, they don't really. The name of that band is sort of jokey. Toad the Wet Sprocket.
It's based on a Monty Python skit.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're not a jokey band. Like listening to this. Okay, so this album, Pale, which is their second or third album?
It's their second record.
Yeah, it comes out in January 1990. It had, I think, a couple of modest hits on it, but I found it very earnest. I found it very straightforward.
They are very earnest.
Yeah.
They're very Santa Barbara, wine and cheese, no shoes, strumming the acoustic guitar.
Jack Johnson.
Yeah, and the other thing, so Toad the Wet Sprocket, they are friends of mine. We played a lot of gigs with them back in those days. I mean, I guess calling them friends now, I haven't seen them in a long time, but I'm friendly with them. And so,
John's going to drop a lot of names on this podcast.
Oh yes, I actually. Anyhow, the thing to understand about Toad the Wet Sprocket was they actually got a record deal in I think it was '88, and there was a bit of a bidding war around them. So the story is ASCAP did these things, but this is how we got our first couple record deals too. The ASCAP was doing this thing called Best Kept Secrets at the Coconut Teaser in LA. They would showcase these bands, and they were all industry people. And Toad the Wet Sprocket was one of those bands, and they had gone to Thousand Oaks, to the now legendary to David Vaught's studio in Thousand Oaks, Camp David it was called. May he rest in peace. David was a member of the band The Association. Remember them? Yeah. And David Vaught, the 60s band.
I don't know this world at all. I didn't even know there was a studio in
Thousand
Oaks
called Camp David.
Who knew there was culture in Thousand Oaks? This sort of like, I don't know, suburb between LA and where we are now in Ventura.
Yeah, he had been the 70s recording artist with a band called The Association that had a couple of minor hits. And he made great records. And he made this, they recorded a record that Columbia actually released. It was called Bread and Circus.
Right.
That was their first record. They made it there. It sounded amazing. We went to Camp David because of how good their record sounded. And so they got signed off of that demo tape, the Bread and Circus album, and they had a big bidding war. There were people throwing money at them, and what they did was they chose to have 3 solid. They didn't take a big bunch of money up front. They said, we don't need a big advance. We can make our own records. We want you to guarantee us you're going to make 3 records. You're going to release 3 records. And so they did that deal with Columbia. And Pale was their second record. Also, Pale was already recorded when they got their record deal. They had already recorded it. They didn't do it at Camp David, I don't think. I actually told you that I have a vinyl original pressing of Pale that Dean, the bass player, gave me. Or maybe Todd, the guitar player. Todd. I don't remember if it was Dean or Todd that gave it to me. I still have it. But yeah, very earnest band from a scene. So
where did they fit into everything else? Because they're like, I see them described as kind of like folk rock a little bit. I mean, they're not a glam metal band at all. And this is pre-grunge, really.
Very much pre-grunge. That's what I'm saying. They came out. I remember in '89 they were touring the B-52s when Love Shack was the biggest song in the world.
Okay, so they kind of connect to REM in my mind a little bit.
That's the key.
Yeah,
REM.
Yeah,
REM was the thing that I'm not suggesting that Toad, Wet Sprocket was in any way imitating REM, but they had that jangly, beautiful. Todd's a lovely guitar player.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
And they had that jangly sound. The labels that were excited about Toad, Wet Sprocket were drawing a line to REM. Look, we're talking about fucking record labels back in the. They didn't know shit. They were just all record labels would do
like that. Yeah.
Something would become popular, and then they'd try to sign 20 bands that sound like it. You know, that's
okay. Now that I'm thinking about REM and like what Automatic for the People is somewhere in here, right? I think actually we're gonna get to Automatic for the People. I think it comes out in 1991.
I think you're right. Yeah.
But Out of Time came out around this time as well. I'll have to let me check it out. REM's Out of Time comes out when because that's Losing My Religion, and that's the song that like really launched them into like mainstream. So that's March of 1991. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll get to Out of Time. But yeah,
so
REM,
getting back to Toad, though,
yeah,
that was the line. That was the line you would draw, like, oh, this is what. And so
they're earthy and folky and kind of college radio.
So if you listen to Pale, that album, one of the interesting things about it is completely unproduced. It sounds like, if you listen to the way the album sounds, it sounds like four guys playing together in a room.
Yeah.
And that's probably how it was recorded. They recorded live. Toad, Wet Sprocket are very good musicians. I agree with you. They were not, I played a lot of shows with them. They were not the kind of music I was into. I was into much heavier, aggressive music back then. They were not my thing, you know.
They're not angry enough.
They're not angry. They strum the chords. You know, they didn't bang them out. But they're very good players.
Yeah.
And so they could go in a room and just make a record like that. And that's what I remember most about Pale. That's a cool, I like that record.
Well, what I read about it is that they were offered the chance to re-record it.
Yeah.
And they turned it down.
That's
and it
right.
seems like that was the right idea because there is something organic about the record. It sounds like they don't make music quite like that sounds like this anymore.
I think they were well advised too. They had a good Brad. Was it Brad that was their manager? But I think they were well advised by their management to say, look, this label is not. They're just going to throw this out there anyway.
Right.
So any money you spend on this record, you're just going to owe them. You guys have records, put them out, and then they just toured around those records, and it was their third record. We'll get into that, where they really hit big and had some big hit songs. So the first two records, Bread and Circus and Pale, did get released on Columbia. There were no big breakout hits on either of those records. Although Bread and Circus is a very good record. There's some really cool songs on there. But yeah, so that's what Pale was, and we were still playing some shows with them when Pale came out. I remember that.
I watched some videos. They looked ancient to me. Watching these, like,
a funny thing about,
I think they were on MTV already at that point.
They sure did. They had their videos come out on MTV. Glenn and I, they had a song called. The song that got a little bit of radio play that was a little bit promoted was called Jam. That's the song Pale. That was kind of the single off that record. Glenn, when we first started playing gigs together, there was a place called Pat's Grass Shack. And if the Toad guys ever listen to this, they'll be cracking up thinking about this. Pat's Grass Shack. Up in Isla Vista, or I think it was in Isla Vista. It was this little shitty bar. And I just remember the guy had this microphone here to announce the band. He was an old guy. Pat ran the place. And he would, next up, Toad, Wet Sprocket. You could barely understand it because the speaker system was so shitty. But he had a rule because he didn't want to pay union fees. No covers. You had to be an original band to play there. So we played there a lot with Toad and the Mudheads and like the I-Rails, who Chris O'Connor from the I-Rails went on to have. They're called Primitive Radio Gods. They had a #1 hit single.
Oh yeah,
probably get into that.
Yeah.
So
it's standing inside a telephone booth or something like
with
that.
Change in My Hand. Yep,
yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, I remember
King
this.
Famous.
That is a deep single from the 90s.
It is a deep single.
Yeah.
so we used to play up there all the time, and Glenn and I weren't old enough to go in.
Yeah.
He and I would have to sit outside eating peanuts waiting to go in and do our sets.
Well, now the seriousness and the lack of like jokey sarcasm or irony to the band makes sense to me, because there was this sort of like the alternative, whatever you would describe that as, whatever you talked about, the underground is going to burst into the mainstream at some point. It seems like one of the hallmarks of it is a sort of like poetic kind of like beatnik coffee house thing.
Very much. And that's also very Santa Barbara at the time. It was very State Street.
Yeah.
State Street was like all these posh wine bars and coffee houses and stuff. And, you know, Santa Barbara is it's the beautiful people, right?
It's such a bubble.
There's not a lot of anger in Santa Barbara. There's no reason to be pissed off in Santa Barbara.
When I went to college in Santa Barbara and I hung out in Isla Vista, and the big acts when I was in college in the later 90s were Jack Johnson.
Yeah.
And people love the Dave Matthews Band.
Sure.
And I feel like the Dave Matthews Band are almost related to Toad the Wet Sprocket in some way. They're like cousins in some way.
That's an interesting connection. But I can certainly see it, although like I don't ever think of Toad as a jam band, but
oh no, they don't have that hippie jam thing going on.
Not the jam thing.
Yeah.
Like they're not gonna, look, if you got Carter Beauford playing drums for you like Dave Matthews does, you should let him play for a while. Like everybody wants to hear that, right?
Right.
Toad isn't that kind of band. They're a song band. They write songs, but yeah, that's an interesting connection, and I can see that.
Yeah. All right, so what else is in January 1990? We've
Ween.
got Ween. Yeah, are you a Ween guy at all? I got into them years ago, like through playlists on Spotify, and I would listen to collections like "This Is Ween," that sort of thing. I never really listened to albums of theirs. They are so all over the place as a band. Like they are nuts and super funny.
They are, in my opinion. So I don't think it's easy to be funny. With music.
No.
I don't even think Zappa was that good at it, and he tried.
Weird Al's pretty good at it.
Well, Weird Al is more comedy than music, right?
Right.
But that record, God, Ween, Satan, the Oneness.
Yeah.
I listened to it again yesterday.
Yeah. That's right.
And I laughed at almost every song.
Insane. Yeah.
There's a song called "You Fucked Up."
So funny.
Where he's mad at this girl for her breaking his heart, and he calls her a fucking Nazi whore.
Yeah, I love it.
I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, yeah. It's their anger and
yeah.
Not only that, but like the different styles that they do.
Yeah,
like they
metal and chunk, chunk, chunk. Yeah.
These guys are on another planet. Totally.
This this is the best part of what happened in the very early 90s, okay? And whether you like Ween or not is irrelevant.
Ween is an
acquired taste. They're not, and would I ever put on Ween to and listen to the whole record and go, it kind of is jokey,
Yeah.
But people were in the early 90s, there was a type of punk rock experimentation, but people who could really play. Like the thing about punk rock is no one could play. That was the whole thing.
Right.
The door into punk rock was wide open because you didn't have to be good.
Two chords.
Yeah.
Go for it.
But musicians that were pretty good were just letting themselves explore whatever, any idea, and then of course it became pretty homogenized when it became a big business.
Right.
Then it became, huge business. By 1992, alternative music was the thing, and it was big business, and it became much more homogenized, and there was a lane. And but right before that, and Ween is like that. Ween, Pavement.
Oh yeah, are you a Pavement guy at all?
I love Pavement.
I know there's a documentary coming out about them. Yeah, it looks really good.
They did it. So we'll get into. I don't want to talk about it right now because we're going to get into to Crooked Rain, and Slanted and Enchanted. Both came out in the 90s. But I just there's so many ideas at work in Flaming Lips,
right?
Pavement. Ween, there's so many ideas, and it was like nothing was thrown out. Like, let's try it. You want to do a country song? Let's do it.
That makes sense. So I think these early, because I'm already, looking in January 1990, February, March, and kind of figuring out what was released, what actually came out. And just in January, with this list we've chosen between Daniel Johnston, Ween, They Might Be Giants, The Sundays. I mean, there does seem like a really diverse set of things going on. And then everyone's listening to fucking Phil Collins sing about homelessness. And that weirdly fits in there too. Like everyone is kind of I don't know, experimenting, trying something. Phil Collins is I don't put him in there with the alternative people at all. And many say he was just sort of cashing in. But either way, it seems like a chaotic moment. It seems like a transitional moment.
Chaotic is not the word I would use. As a person who was making music at that time, I thought it was a very exciting time. I felt like
chaos can be exciting.
So yeah, that's true. So I felt like the 80s had been what they were, and then we roll into the 90s, and like something I remember, and we'll probably get to this record, Blood Sugar Sex Magic.
Yeah.
And here's the Chili Peppers making this like pure, serious funk record. You know? Like that's a great record. And by the way, we'll talk about it more, but it also rescued the snare drum from the 80s. Because the 80s was not kind of the snare drum. But
Blood Sugar Sex Magic, for my memory of that is that my brother had the tape and it was in his car. And we kept it out of the house because we didn't want my parents to know we were listening to this. Because, it says blood, sugar, sex, magic on the front of it. And so it was like the thing that bonded me to my older brother was driving around with him because I couldn't drive. He was older. He had that tape. And it was like driving around with him and listening to that album meant like, oh, I'm with the cool kids now. I'm like listening to something edgy and dangerous.
It's a great record.
Yeah.
And I will talk about it more. But like that's just such an example to me of that time period, the early 90s, where people were going, let's try something. Like there was always something funky about. I mean, come on, George Clinton produced their records in the 80s, so there was always something. Really
they've
funky
been around for a while, right? Like Blood Sugar Sex Magic is like their 4th or 5th album.
Oh yeah, their guitar player, the first guitar player, already died of a heroin overdose.
That's right.
Slovak.
Yeah,
but they had a funk edge. But Anthony was rapping, and they were doing stuff like Me and My Friends and Truman Don't Kill Coyotes and I Want to Party on Your Pussy. It was
weird
more
shit.
It was more jokey.
Yeah.
With but Flea being a serious player, right? And then Hillel, God rest his soul, died, which was devastating to the band, but they got Frusciante, who was like a Hendrix guy, okay? Like in the Hendrix model. And then they got Chad Smith, who's like one of the greatest drummers, man. He's so great. And they just said, now Rick, you got to give a lot of credit to Rick Rubin, who produced it.
Yeah. Let's
do a real funk album. And so they really, like that record is something else for them, in my opinion. They've never, before or since, they never reached that apex. But I think there was a time of this great experimentation amongst alternative artists that, and then, then Nirvana happens and everything changes. But that's what that time was like.
How much is drugs a part of what we call alternative? Because it feels like, I don't know, when I think about like finding the cool kids, whatever that meant, and now I realize they weren't really cool. But like the drugs had a lot to do with subculture to me. Mm-hmm. Whether it was like weed smokers, mostly weed smokers, honestly, which is a different vision of things. For those that are young now, smoking weed doesn't have the same charge that it did back then, where you had to like go to someone's house and like you found a culture. In other words, I think what I'm trying to figure out is sort of like how much having friends, what they call social capital, like has to do with music and identity. And it seems like drug culture intersects with that.
Oh, for sure. This is what I think happens. And this certainly happened in the 90s. So many great rock singers from the 90s have died going down that path, but it's not unique to that era.
Right.
That I believe that there's the first aspect of that is, and my background, and for people watching, I was addicted to heroin and crack cocaine in the 90s.
Do you have any with you now?
As a matter of fact,
it's from the 90s. I keep it as my lucky heroin bag. Yeah.
By the way, one of the funniest things I've ever heard, there was a punk rock band, and it was called Leftover Crack. If you've ever used crack, there's no such thing as leftover crack. But anyway, so my experience is from within that world. It's been a long time, but I believe that, first of all, for truly creative people, the way they feel life in the world and others can be intense. And that intensity can be experienced as pain. And sometimes you take a drink or you try a drug and the pain goes away. And that's what leads folks like those types of people into that, first of all. And then there's also very much an element of young people going, my heroes do it, so I want to do it.
Right.
So there's almost like this, I think that in the 90s that really happened. Like it almost became cool to be on heroin.
Yeah.
Which is
I'm
crazy.
I'm reading this book right now. I think it's called 3 Shades of Blue. It's about the jazz scene in New York in the 50s with like Charlie Parker and Miles Davis and all these guys.
Strung out on junk, yeah.
All of them. And Charlie Parker especially was their god. And he was this guy that was just like, could go to the bathroom and inject himself with heroin and then come on stage and like blow the saxophone like no one had ever heard. And it was actually a curse for other players because they looked at him and they're like, well, if he could do it, I could too.
Thinking it was the heroin that gave him the ability.
Right.
Nope. Yeah. Not the heroin.
Well, he was dead at 34 years old. Yeah, and that was that.
What happens, for all you kids out there watching, all that happens is that the drug sedates the critical thinking aspect of your mind, and so what's there behind it is able to be released.
Right.
The inner critic is shut up.
Right.
The voice says, "I can't. That's not cool. I should." Just shuts up. I mean, I have a plastic container full of journals of lyrics. That was what I used to do. I used to get high and write, and there was nothing in me saying, "You can't do that, stupid," And so
you had the energy to do that. A lot of people I feel like just nod off. And
I had to clean a lot of puke off the pages, but I wasn't gaining something from the drug that made me creative. I was accessing a creative part of my brain, and you could do the same thing with meditation or with breathing, But I was
George Harrison who looms over. Look, he's giving me the thumbs up about it over there. George Harrison's whole thing was that let's drop the drugs and find natural ways to get to Nirvana.
But that's we will get to Nirvana. Right. But that's the ridiculous misconception, and I think that was really happening in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Who else?
They Might Be Giants.
Another humorous band. Yeah. They actually had a big hit called Don't Let's Start in the 80s.
Yeah, well, I feel like a lot of these songs I remember being around. I mean, where did I hear them? Like Birdhouse in Your Soul was around. Particle Man. You remember Particle Man?
Particle Man.
Right.
That is them. Shit, I forgot about that.
Right.
But Birdhouse in Your Soul was actually a popular song.
Yeah.
It's a weird song.
They're a weird band. And They Might Be Giants is, it surprised me that they were in here in 1990. Like
they're still doing
I didn't discover this band or this album until much later. Yeah, but you know what? They moved to doing children's music. Like they made a bunch of kids albums, like ABCs and numbers and shit like that. Also which totally makes sense.
They've made a shitload of money by writing the theme song for Malcolm in the Middle.
That's right. Well, I
hope they made a shitload of money. I don't know, but
They Might Be Giants seems like they're another band like Ween, where they kind of play with all these musical styles. They're like they're all over the place.
So they did kids music?
They do kids music now.
Now?
Yeah, they do like
the Wiggles.
Yeah, they do like fun with. Let me get the. It's like the ABCs and shit like that. Here Come the ABCs, and that's their second children's album that came out in 2005, I guess. So they're not doing that currently. They've been around for a long time.
Was that album okay? They have an album called Flood.
That's the one that came out in January 90.
I think that album was pretty successful.
It's huge. Yeah. But I know it's huge. I know that it's one of those things that I had to be told about. I know exactly when I found this album. I went on a road trip after college in October of 2000. So this is 10 years after this album came out. And the guy I went on the road trip with was like, "You got to hear this record. Have you heard They Might Be Giants?" As if it was a new band. And it kind of made me feel like there was this. They're nerdy. They're like very. A lot of the stuff is like literary references. They have songs about 19th century U.S. presidents,
and that became very cool in the 90s.
Nerdy, yeah, you're right. That I was attracted to the nerd stuff. I mean, we'll get to the band that was my band in the 90s is totally embarrassing, but maybe not. I'm not going to be embarrassed by anything. Ben Folds 5. I loved Ben Folds 5. And they were nerd rock. They were sort of outcast, alienated.
He had that great song about the girl getting an abortion.
Brick. Yeah, that was their big hit.
That was a great song.
And the Battle of Who Could Care Less, which is, a lot of the irony, sarcasm, that sort of stuff. Yeah. But They Might Be Giants is very piano-driven, a lot of it. And I was always attracted to piano-driven music. I mentioned Billy Joel. Piano-driven melodies I'm into. As much as wouldn't you say that the 90s were a big guitar age? Distorted guitars.
It's the last true rock and roll era.
Yeah.
It is.
Distorted guitars were the sound of the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you want to get to our essential songs of this month? Have you narrowed yours down? I know what I'm going to say.
So yeah, you go first.
You want me to go first?
Or you want me to go first?
It doesn't matter. I can go first.
Okay, you go first.
Because you know what's from the album we were just discussing, actually. My choice for the essential song of January 1990 is a song from the album Flood by the band They Might Be Giants. It's called Dead. And I love that song, and I chose it in part because it's a personal favorite. But I also was thinking about it this morning as I was listening to this list, and I was sort of thinking, this sort of, to me, captures something about where the 90s is headed. Because the song is about being a product on a shelf. It's about being like a bag on a grocery store shelf. And the main lyric of it, the chorus, is, now it's over, I'm dead, and I haven't done anything that I want. Or, I'm still alive, and there's nothing I want to do. And I thought that captures so much of that kind of like boredom, the irony, the feeling of like nothing matters anymore. Almost like, that post-historical moment, like we're after the Berlin Wall has fallen, we're after the Cold War now. We're just like the like sort of orphans of history just sitting here in the 90s, and all that's left is just sort of like stare at the TV. Like that's going to become such a trope throughout the 90s that I felt like this song by They Might Be Giants was a little ahead of its time in capturing the sort of attitude that's going to become, like you said, from the underground into the mainstream. So that's why my choice of the essential song for January 1990 is Dead by They Might Be Giants.
You saying that reminds me of, so I will probably reference this band a lot because I think that I believe that all the popular rock music of the 90s, or not all of it, most of it, there are blueprints they were following. And a lot of the pop punk that became popular, the Nirvana, Weezer, that kind of stuff, the blueprint was, in my opinion, was the two bands, the Pixies and the Replacements.
Yeah.
And there's a third band I would throw in there, Husker Du. And Paul Westerberg of the Replacements, like, he is, in my opinion, the godfather of alternative music. Songwriters, the guys in Goo Goo Dolls, Johnny Resnick from Goo Goo Dolls should be paying that guy royalties. I hope he is. I know Johnny Resnick looks up to Westerberg, so I'm not going to diss him. But he wrote a song called Bastards of Young. It's on Tim, which is an album that came out, I think, in 1987. But what you just said reminds me of the chorus. It says, "We're the sons of no one, bastards of the young. Willingness should claim us. We got no wars to name us." Like, there's this. It's sort of we were just sort of this. Who are we?
Right.
Generation.
Yeah. No, you feel that. I mean, by the time you get to Fight Club, the movie in like 1998 or 1999, Brad Pitt is just saying it that explicitly that we have no Great Depression, we have no Great War. Our war is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives. Yeah.
What defines us is the excess in which we live.
Right. Yes. Excess.
The 80s was just excess. It was just, it was just fun and flash, and that's where the 80s spawned the superstar. Video had a lot to do with this, right? The superstar, pop star, and then also the backlash against that, the anti-pop star. That was a big part of the 90s, an anti-pop star.
Which is so funny. To think about like Kurt Cobain as an anti-pop star when we just said like he was hot, he was sexy, he had his own sort of thing going on. He's now like on T-shirts everywhere. Like everywhere I look, kids are wearing Nirvana T-shirts. There's something about him being very much a pop star.
Well, that was in his suicide letter.
Yeah.
There's he felt like there was nowhere he could go and not be that thing he didn't want to be anymore.
So what those bands that you named that I think are totally important, and I should listen to them more. I do listen to the Pixies a lot. Pixies, the Replacements, and Husker Du as like being influential to that alternative sound and attitude, right? Like it's not just sound; it's sort of position.
It's taking the punk rock ethic and saying, let's see if we can write pop songs under this umbrella, because they're great songwriters. There's really good songwriting going on there, but it's very punk rock, Now
it's not just Ramones, like no, like one note.
No.
Although they were good songwriters too.
The Ramones are great, man. Yeah. But also you have to also say that the grunge thing, that was a lot of Zeppelin and Sabbath.
Yeah, I
influenced.
could see that.
It was very Zeppelin. So that stuff like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains, and I don't say so much that they're coming from the Pixies, Paul Westerberg.
No, because I don't think
school.
of the Pixies as having that like broody affect and that sort of. It's also like those guys all sounded the same. Their vocals. Like they kind of had a exactly.
Yeah,
they were down here, a lot of drop D tuning,
a lot of drop D tuning,
like a very like it's a kind of a narrow genre grunge in a lot of ways.
Yeah, if we maybe we'll get into this. One of the most influential things that happened in that Seattle scene was Mother Love Bone.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew Wood died of a heroin overdose, the lead singer, and that band split into those are the guys that went on and became Pearl Jam,
right?
And then the other guys became a band called Love Battery that we used to tour with a lot. But that was a very influential band, and they were very like. Well, we'll get into that, I guess. Yeah. So my top songs of that era, I'm gonna go with. I had a hard time choosing. I had two.
Are you going to cheat already and choose
No, I'm
two?
going to choose one.
Okay.
It's
all right. You can tell me your runner-up.
I almost picked the song "Tick" by Ween.
Yeah.
Just because I laughed so hard listening to it.
Yeah.
It's so funny, and it's a good song. It's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, they are a little Zappa-ish to me, where I'm laughing a lot.
Yeah.
And the songs are sort of like wow, but they're also like like you said, I'm not going to put that on.
But it's funny
for everyone to enjoy together. It feels very personal. Like I'll listen to it alone in the car.
You brought up Weird Al.
Yes.
That's a shtick.
Right.
The Ween stuff is funny without having a shtick. It's just the way they put those lyrics to that music is funny somehow.
Yeah.
I think that's really a rare. I don't think that's easy to do.
No, Ween's amazing.
But we'll get into more. When we get into the Weezer stuff, Rivers Cuomo was capable of that once in a while, being funny. But
totally.
But my pick was "Here's What the Story Ends" by the Sundays.
Love that song
because it is, in my opinion, if you gave me this list of artists and the records that came out that year, and I could only take one with me on a trip, it would be that album. Just such great jangle pop, and with Harriet Wheeler is very interesting.
That's funny that we both landed on the same place with this list, because I was, I put all these albums on. I listened to the Daniel Johnston, which is sort of tough to listen to for more than one reason. His voice, his sort of affect is so intense, but also like the stuff he's singing about is so crazy. Toad the Wet Sprocket, I recognize the artfulness of the band, and I'm just not into them, I guess. They're just not my thing.
Yeah.
Ween is Ween. They are singular. They are absolutely unique in America.
Great.
Yeah, and they're drug guys too. Like,
are they?
I think to the point where it kind of ruined them.
Oh, really? I didn't.
Psychedelic drugs
I didn't
and
know
like
that.
pills and they're just.
That's funny.
There's a couple of like speaking of like YouTube music shit. There's a show called Guitar Moves where a guy goes around and like talks to guitarists about like their music and their art and everything like that. And there's a Ween episode that's just like it's just one of the guys from Ween, and it's like this guy looks so fucked up. He's exactly what you would think he is.
So I have a quick aside if we have time.
Yeah, totally.
Are their names really Dean and Gene Ween?
I don't think so. No.
I'm pretty sure that they're not.
They chose those names.
That's great.
And I think they've known each other since high school. They're like totally like maintained a certain kind of punk weird identity. But it is. Yeah, the Sundays are kind of weird. Oddly, the winners of this month. Yeah. I know we're not choosing winners and losers. It's not about that. But I would totally, and I do want to have this particular album, Reading, Writing, and Arithmetic, on vinyl. I would like to listen to this a lot because it's a pleasant sort of vibe, if that makes sense. To use a word that the kids are using, there's vibes to this album that feel very warm and nostalgic and really bring me back to, I don't know, some place that maybe I've never even been.
It's probably one of the last great jangle rock songs. Jangly.
Yeah.
That was very. That's that
It
song.
sounds like 80s music.
It's very much an 80s
Yes.
song. That's right. And it's that jangle pop was popular to an extent with bands like REM and it's got a great hook and I like their sound a lot. It's cool.
It's super cool. Well, January 1990 was a really intense month. I think we knocked it out of the park here, John, for the first episode. Very much looking forward to continuing the journey. We'll be back with February 1990.
Only 119 to go.
I know, I was going to say that. Only 119 to go. All right, everyone. See you next month.